They called it Imperium Sine Fine, an empire without end. But for many, Rome's eternity came at the cost of their own. Behind the grandeur of marble columns and the myths of noble Caesars lies a darker story, one written in ash, blood, and silence. While we marvel at Rome's roads and aqueducts, those who stood in its path remembered something else entirely: annihilation, enslavement, starvation, and fear. Rome's genius was not merely in its architecture or law, but in the brutal machinery of control. It did not just conquer the world, it consumed it. This is the untold legacy of Rome: civilization through destruction. Chapter 1. Crucifixion, Pain as Policy. To challenge Rome was to invite more than death. It was to be transformed into a warning. Crucifixion was not just a punishment. It was a performance, a calculated ritual of fear. Known by the Romans as crux, it became a towering symbol of what awaited those who defied imperial rule. This was no swift execution. Crucifixion broke the body slowly, publicly, and without mercy. It was reserved for slaves, rebels, and enemies of the state, those whose suffering could be turned into a spectacle. The message was clear: submission meant life. Resistance meant a death that lingered long after the last breath. Nowhere is this policy more terrifying than in the aftermath of the Spartacus rebellion. After finally crushing the uprising in 71 BCE, General Crassus ordered a horrific demonstration of power. Along the Appian Way, the road that led into the heart of Rome, more than 6,000 slaves were crucified. Their bodies stretched for over 100 miles, forming a corridor of agony. It was not just retribution, it was psychological warfare. And it worked. No slave rebellion ever again reached such a scale. But this wasn't limited to rebellious slaves. In conquered territories, from Judea to Gaul, mass crucifixions were used to suppress resistance. Posts remained standing long after the bodies decayed, haunting reminders of Rome's unflinching resolve. Crucifixion was not a deviation from Roman values. It was an extension of them. Chapter 2. Carthage, the civilization that vanished. Rome didn't always seek to rule its enemies. Sometimes it sought to erase them. The destruction of Carthage was not simply a military campaign. It was the systematic obliteration of a rival civilization. The phrase Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, became a chilling mantra in the Roman Senate, endlessly repeated by Cato the Elder. His words became policy. In 146 BCE, at the end of the Third Punic War, Rome laid siege to Carthage under the command of Scipio Aemilianus. The siege lasted more than 2 years, and when the walls finally fell, the city was not spared. It was annihilated. The fires burned for over a week. Tens of thousands were either enslaved or slaughtered. Ancient sources claim the city was dismantled brick by brick. The story that Roman soldiers sowed salt into the earth may be legend, but the message was real. This land would never recover. Carthage would never rise again. Rome did not merely defeat Carthage, it buried it under the weight of Roman supremacy. In doing so, it declared a principle that would define its imperial strategy. Some enemies must not be subdued. They must be forgotten. Chapter 3. Gaul, cities erased from the map. In the mid-1st century BCE, Julius Caesar looked northward, not just with ambition, but with calculation. Gaul, the land of what is now France and Belgium, was not merely a foreign territory. To Caesar, it was a canvas upon which he would paint his legacy through conquest, brutality, and blood. At the time, Gaul was a mosaic of tribal societies, fiercely independent and often in conflict with one another. These divisions made them vulnerable to Roman manipulation. Caesar exploited these rifts expertly, forging temporary alliances with some tribes while ruthlessly crushing others. But this was not diplomacy. It was a prelude to extermination. For nearly a decade, Caesar's campaign unfolded with calculated savagery. He would later document his victories in Commentari de Bello Gallico, a series of war memoirs that doubled as propaganda. While the Roman Senate read of triumphs and glories, the people of Gaul experienced something very different: obliteration. One of the most infamous episodes of this campaign occurred in 52 BCE during the siege of Avaricum. The city, located in modern-day central France, had resisted Roman domination as part of a larger rebellion led by the chieftain Vercingetorix. Caesar described Avaricum as the most beautiful city in all Gaul, renowned for its prosperity and culture, but beauty offered no protection. After a prolonged siege, Roman forces finally broke through the city's defenses. What followed was not a military engagement, it was a massacre. Caesar's own writings claim that nearly 40,000 inhabitants were put to the sword, men, women, and children, slaughtered not in the heat of battle, but as a calculated display of dominance. And Avaricum was only one name among many. Cities like Cenabum, Noviodunum, and Uxellodunum suffered similar fates. Their walls were breached, their populations butchered or enslaved, their buildings razed. In Uxellodunum, Caesar escalated his cruelty further. Chapter 4. Starvation as a siege weapon. Rome's brilliance in warfare extended beyond the battlefield. It knew how to win without a single sword drawn, through starvation. Sieges weren't always about walls and battering rams. Sometimes Rome simply waited, cut off a city's water, sever its food supplies, block every route of escape, then let time deliver the killing blow. This was not just strategy, it was doctrine. Roman military texts even praised it as a wise economy of blood. One of the most devastating examples came during the siege of Numantia between 134 and 133 BCE. The Celtiberian city in Hispania refused to submit. In response, Scipio Aemilianus, the same general who had destroyed Carthage, surrounded it with a massive wall. No one could enter. No food could reach the people. Inside the city, despair turned to madness. Famine ravaged the population. Families chose death over surrender. Some set fire to their own homes. Others committed mass suicide. The city was consumed not by Roman swords, but by Roman patience. The same tactic was used in Jerusalem in 70 CE. Under General Titus, Roman forces encircled the city. Famine took hold within weeks. Josephus, a Jewish historian, described unspeakable suffering. Bodies filled the streets. Starvation did what armies could not. For Rome, hunger was not just a byproduct of war. It was policy. A slow execution with no visible blade. Chapter 5. Slavery, the business of conquest. To the Romans, war was not only about victory, it was about profit. Conquest did not end when the last enemy fell. It ended when the defeated had been turned into resources. Mass enslavement was a core function of Roman expansion. Cities that resisted were emptied. Entire populations, men, women, and children, were marched away in chains. They became the currency of conquest. The Roman Republic and Empire built one of the largest slave economies in history. Every campaign brought a fresh supply. After the sack of Epirus in 167 BCE, 150,000 people were enslaved by General Aemilius Paulus. The plunder was so vast that Rome suspended taxes on its citizens for decades. Slaves paid for the empire's prosperity with their lives. These captives were not just workers, they were symbols of power. They labored in mines, fields, homes, and bureaucracies. But those taken by war, those who saw their cities fall, were treated as disposable. Their suffering was the price of Roman dominance. One of the most chilling examples came after the fall of Jerusalem. Over 90,000 were enslaved. Many were sent to labor camps. Others were paraded in chains through Rome. The strong were sold to foreign markets. Their fate was sealed the moment they lost. Slavery wasn't an aberration in Roman society. It was its foundation. Every temple built, every road paved, every palace erected, carried the weight of countless lives. Chapter 6. Rome's Legacy, Greatness Through Erasure. We remember Rome for its art, its law, its achievements. But what do we forget in the process? Behind every triumphal arch is a people that was crushed. Behind every marble statue stands a field of bones. Rome's legacy is not only in what it built, but in what it was willing to destroy in order to endure. These were not isolated tragedies. They were policies, systemic tools of domination. From crucifixions and starvation to enslavement and cultural erasure, Rome perfected the art of ruling through fear. Its empire was forged in silence, enforced by terror and maintained by brutality. The ruins that attract tourists today were once the final echoes of civilizations that no longer exist, their names erased, their stories lost, their pain forgotten. So how do we measure the greatness of a civilization? By the monuments it leaves behind, or by the lives it was willing to sacrifice along the way? Rome gave the world much, but it took far more. As Tacitus once wrote, with bitter clarity, they make a desert and call it peace.